Hey, it's Warren Sprouse. This is the Bible Forum. It's Sunday, August 20th, 2017. I want to challenge you with the idea that as Christians, we've lost the biblical narrative, and it shows. The author of a piece at intellectualtakeout.com is challenging us in ways that I think are significant. This author is confident that our children could retell significant portions of Star Wars, Harry Potter, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and The Hunger Games, but would be totally unable to do the same for any story in the Bible. And the author thinks there's a very good reason for that. Could most people who call themselves Christians do dramatic retellings from memory of the scenes and the parables from the Bible? Could their children? Do they actually do these retellings? Are these the stories that capture their attention and their imagination? Do they spend hours discussing them with family and with friends? Do they think about them before they fall asleep? I don't think so. But the Bible still ranks as the most purchased book in the world. And though snippets of it are heard in once-a-week church services and discussed in study groups, it has ceased to be a part of the storytelling that influences the West's mainstream culture. And make no mistake, storytelling serves a crucial role in shaping a culture's identity. You notice this even if you don't think about it very much. Think of the narratives of our culture. The narratives are generally anti-God, anti-America, anti-family, anti-godly character. And these show up in the public discourse as more and more Americans are acting out in godless, unstructured, and destructive ways. Why? Well, because we think differently. The way we think now is being fashioned by the culture. It used to be fashioned by the Word of God. Racism is the common theme today, and it's the theme that drags the culture into chaos. This week it was ESPN announcer who characterized a black tennis player's approach to her game as guerrilla tactics, and he was fired. He could have been talking about guerrilla warfare. It would have been fine. But to use it with a black person? Unacceptable. Why? Well, I think there's a number of reasons here. Primarily, the people he was talking to have no clue, apparently, what guerrilla tactics are all about. But there's the incendiary racial culture that drives us. And there's Americans today. The average American is under the age of 40, which means they don't know the English language. And they don't really care. I've told you before, the average American IQ is 98. And the average American gets their news from Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, we older types don't do it that way. But we're not the dominant group numerically. Not even socially. I mean, you get a certain age and they just write you off. Nobody pays any attention to me. I'm old. What do I know? I know more than you. Do you remember 1945? Well, I read about it. Do you remember 1950? I mean, come on. The average American is in their late 30s, 35 to 38 years of age. That means they were born in the 1980s. Think of all that they missed. Think of the context. They were not even aware of the world situation until 9/11. And that burst upon them with startling implications. It shook them at their very foundation. They weren't taught American history, at least not prior to Reconstruction, if they were in a public school. They weren't taught American values, biblical values. They weren't taught family values, largely because they don't have one. They weren't taught to think, only to respond to media, to music, to stimulation of one sort or another, superficial. They weren't raised in church. The internet was their church. The great morality plays of the Bible and in classical literature and in history are all foreign to them. When Barack Obama burst on the scene, it was glorious. Maybe we weren't a racist nation after all. I didn't vote for the man either time. But I got emotional. I had a black friend of mine who I met in a restaurant after the election. He said, "Hey, what about that?" And I said, I couldn't vote for him because of his politics. I said, but I am proud of my nation, my country, that they could do this. And even in talking to him, I welled up with tears. It was an emotional thing for me. It was glorious in a lot of ways. A Barna study in 2005, asking the average American in their mid-20s, found that just 1 in 6 American adults said that they made moral decisions based on the Bible. 1 out of 6. When asked whether they believe moral truth is based on absolute standards or whether it's relative to the circumstances, Americans were divided into roughly equal segments. 35% of them contended that moral truth was absolute, or at least not dependent on circumstance. 32% said morality is always determined by the situation. And the remaining 33% said they didn't know if moral truth is absolute or relative. Now, I'm guessing the 35% that agreed with the statement were probably all us old people. About 70% of evangelical Christians reported believing that moral truth is absolute. Only 42% of non-evangelicals held that view. Barna said, quote, most born-again Christians hold a confusing and inherently contradictory set of religious beliefs that go unchecked by the leaders and teachers of their faith community. He said it. We'll believe it. I've been saying it for 17 years on this program. I just counted up today over 840 episodes. Sunday nights, maybe 4 or 5 Sunday nights I couldn't do it in that 17 years. Nobody listens to us. Will they listen to Barna? That was a 2005 study. What do you think?